Hey folks, Steve here with another Dark Valley video. In this video we're going to be looking at turn 15 of the overall game. As a reminder for folks who've been watching, the entirety of Dark Valley goes across 44 turns. Turn 1, which is June 1941, to 1944, which is May 1945. And we are playing through this starting from turn 12 for Case Blue. We had done a turn 1 onward for Barbarossa, and we decided at the end of that scenario, when it would normally end if you were just playing the scenario, to shut down and restart on turn 12, which is Case Blue, Fall Blau. And we've been playing since then, so we're now on turn 15. The Case Blue scenario, or the Fall Blau scenario in the scenario book, if you're just playing that scenario by itself, will only last for a few more turns, but my intention is to keep going for the campaign game and just see what happens. And if somehow one of the factions achieves an automatic victory along the way, we'll reassess what we want to do. Because I do want to play, the whole experience, right? The Soviets have the Axis has the great initiative at the beginning of the game. In the middle, things get kind of hairy, and it's both sides slugging it out. And then eventually we get to the point where the Soviets have now taken the overall initiative and are pushing the Axis back. And I want to kind of get to all of that because this game is so big that I really like to experience all that it has to offer. And gosh, I mean, once I'm finished playing it this way, when I'm totally done with all of this, I'm not sure how soon I'll come back to the game, just of how big it is. But I will have surely gotten my money's worth by this point. I'm having fun with it, so we're doing good. So I went ahead and skipped through and took care of some of the initial steps of the turn already, just in respect to time for the viewers. So Axis reinforcement was really basic. We just had a few infantry step replacements. There was no Axis reinforcements. The Soviets got a few mechanized corps as well as a guard mechanized corps, but when I took a look through the placement rules where you convert an existing Soviet corps into a guard mechanized corps, mechanized corps is converted to a guard mechanized corps. I couldn't find any pre-existing mechanized corps, so I put it on the turn track, and I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but I suspect maybe, I just don't know if I could have taken one of the mechanized corps that I was bringing in as reinforcements and just replace it automatically with that guard one. It wasn't clear, so I just put it on the next turn, for better or for worse. And then the Soviets had some replacements, and they brought back, it was mostly infantry, though they did bring a guard cavalry corps back out. And we put those reinforcements over in the Stalingrad, Engels area, Saratov and Stalingrad and Krasnodar. And so we're going to try to, you can start to see just the outline of here's the new Soviet line. It's here and then somewhere through here it's going to start to come together. And then the strategic movement stuff was relatively minor. We got to move a few units around with rail. That was mostly to just try to get some guys that were kind of far back moved up a little bit so that when they do move, they can get where they need to be a little more quickly. I did that for both sides, nothing too major to note there. And now we get to the action phase, right? And here comes the fall weather, right? And we're going to start to see the Axis lose a little bit of their steam power here. So this is different from the last couple of turns. We're into a different setup here. Now the Axis still has initiative. They're still going to get to go first out of the turn. But we're in the September to October 1942 chit recipe here. So this turn and the next turn will be the same. And what we're looking at is move and a combat and any panzer headquarters. And note, this is not move or combat. This is move only, combat only. So now we no longer have that flexibility of picking whichever one now makes sense to take. And in terms of our panzer selection, we could only pick one. I've decided to pick the 2nd Panzer, and that is the group that is HQ's right around here. I need to figure out what I'm going to do with this Voronezh pocket. And so that is why I want that HQ to have another action, so that we can either outmaneuver the Soviets that have been coming in and try to make something more of the pocket that failed to collapse this past turn, the alternative was going to be the first Panzer around Rostov, and I need to get these guys moving. I need to either have them go south and knock out the Krasnodar area, or I need to make a play for Stalingrad. And at this point, I think I'm going to have them go down to Krasnodar, but I just feel like 2nd Panzer is going to take priority here, and they're just going to get their normal movement and combat. So things are going to slow down for the Axis advance for sure. Not much more we can do about that. I do realize I'm going to have a constant glare on this part of the map now because of my one light over there. As a lot of the action is going to start happening over here, I'll have to figure something out about that or reposition the camera better. But again, looking at the initiative chits, now much more limited for the Axis. And the Soviets actually don't change, so they continue to have the Stavka chit for reserve-type activities. I opted not to put anything into the reserve. I want to put them where they're at now, the reinforcements now, because I need coverage there. They're already going to be where I would have sent them anyway for Stavka. So basically, the Stavka chit's going to be useless this turn. I might even just set it aside. But otherwise, the Soviets just get a regular move, and they get their combat Zhukov again, which, as we've seen in other videos, basically means any Soviet units that are attacking that are not in range of Zhukov are attacking as if they were out of supply, which basically means why bother? So really, it's just what is Zhukov doing, and where is he at, and then the units around him will be combat effective. And we've seen that those units that have been able to attack in supply can make some pretty devastating hits. And just as another review of where we're at with that near Zhukov, who is the brown HQ, you can kind of see right there. We've actually made some pretty decent attacks with the Soviets. We've created this little, we've snaked in here. It's a little dangerous, but now we've been able to push forward a little bit here, and now those units in the center could become a pocket. We knocked something loose over right there. You can see there's a gap now by Orel where we had I think it was a retreat at some point somewhere along the way, and the Germans got pushed back. So, yeah, it's the Soviets are doing something, and this could be bad news for the Germans. They might have Army Group Center really start to lose it, even while what was Army Group South is now making some gains here. But we're kind of splitting things up. Where now it's like Army Group North is just sort of lined up over here. I could create a pocket right there, maybe that's conceivable. But Army Group North's not doing a whole lot. Army Group Center's getting punched in the face, and now it's like Army Group South and Army Group Deep South down here. And they're going to be operating separately for a while, I think, just because they have different objectives at this point. We're just not enough Axis forces to go around. So the Axis needs to decide what it wants to do for its first move. I am debating on a move because what I need to do in the early part of this turn as the Axis is I need to get some of the panzers that I put up here that are out of supply. I need to pull them back towards the HQ or even reposition the HQ so they can actually be activated and be in supply when logistics comes up when we get the 2nd Panzer chit. So we need to figure out how they're going to operate being out of supply. I think movement is just going to be important. I really find a lot of the time that the initiative action for the Axis movement makes a lot of sense because by the end of the previous turn, things are kind of scattered all over the place. But if you can move, you can now set up for future attacks. That seems like a thing to do a lot of the time, at least in my experience or how I'm playing it. So it's likely going to be movement. Then that way we can get these guys starting to come down and try to nip all this down here in the bud because they're starting to get more reinforcements. They're starting to project power to protect the rail lines over here to keep things in supply. I need my Axis forces to surge forward and start cutting rail lines and screwing up the Soviet growth down there. So I think that's what we're going to do. It's probably going to be movement. I'll put a cut here, and when we come back, that first movement will be complete. I suspect this turn will go very quickly because we've got less chits overall. We'll see what happens. Well, here I go being all risky again. So movement is complete, and you know, I still think this was the right choice. But boy, I'm putting myself at risk a little bit here. So down in the south, I've surged some units forward, and I am basically looking to cut these rail lines. Now I'm putting some units potentially out of supply, and I know that. But the idea is I'm also going to completely put these guys out of supply because they can't trace supply down through here. They got to get it through these rail lines here because the supply comes from the east part of the map. And so it won't completely knock everybody out. I don't have enough ZOC coverage to really make it all work the way I want it to, I don't think. But a lot of units will get knocked out of supply, and I think that, to me, is really the important thing. So that's the move I made. We'll keep pushing. I'm trying to put some units out here to just kind of help put something in the way of any goofy Soviet moves. Over here, I actually am being a little dangerous. I've moved some units around. I used the German infiltration move to move up here, and I'll be able to get them back into supply, and I will further cut even more guys out of supply and potentially isolate them. The Soviets can probably react to that, but whenever the logistics chit comes up will really matter there. And again, we're creating a situation where the Soviets are having to react there, and they've got to do something about it because we're really not even far from Moscow, really. If you see, like, Moscow's here, you know, we've got units over here. Well, you know, we've got a whole bunch that are coming up like this. So they got to watch out. So that's the movement. It's pretty basic in terms of just what I've tried to do, all except for, you know, me trying to be nefarious over here because those tank corps, Soviet tank corps, don't project ZOCs, interestingly enough. So we can move around a little bit and project ZOCs to cut guys out of supply. And I think that's the real key thing that we're trying to do here. So, yeah, there you go. Okay, I'm going to go to the cup and we'll see what comes out, and that will determine what happens next. And it is, it's our 2nd Panzer. Wow. That's convenient. Okay, so now the trouble is a lot of units around the 2nd HQ are going to have limited ability to do stuff. So this is actually, I should have planned this out a little bit better, probably. But that's okay. I think that's okay. So we'll either do a movement in combat with only motorized units, or we'll do combat and then move. And I'm not sure what's better in this case. I could see a few instances where we could do either. So I'll need to spend some time thinking about it. This is not how I wanted the 2nd chit to come up yet. So that's a bit troubling. But we'll see what happens. So we'll be back. So this activation didn't go well. I think having the 2nd Panzer chit come out so soon was really bad, because what I needed the 2nd Panzer activation to do was, like, if the Soviets got to move and attack or whatever, fine, and then have the 2nd Panzer come up later in the turn, maybe after logistics or before logistics. I mean, I guess the point is, it was not good that it came up so early. So I've moved some units around. I pulled back a little bit from this line right here, so that I've tightened the noose as much as I can around the units that are sort of locked up at the moment. And I'm sliding some of my own out-of-supply Panzers around. I can almost get some, you know, like, I just need to cross a few more hexes, and I've got all that bottled up, but At this point now, I'm out of movements, so the only thing that the Axis really has left going for it is combat. At this point, I mean, there are certainly some combats here that I can try to collapse this the old-fashioned way and just attack, but I've thinned myself out a little bit, so this could very well be, like, not the Stalingrad disaster, this could be the Voronezh disaster, where I've overextended myself to try to collapse this pocket, and it just fails, and everything else collapses. Otherwise, if I were able to make this work somehow, and get all this stuff cleared up around here, and be able to maneuver around, I mean, I could still be headed towards Moscow. I mean, I can entertain those ideas, at least to a certain point. I mean, that could lead to a game over for the Soviets, even. So, I mean, we're in a really critical part of the war, I think, right here. So we're going to pull the next chit, and this is, I don't know, this is tough. I don't know what's going to happen, or even what the right move is going to be for either side, but we'll pull it, and we'll see. Let's see what we get, and I get, well, all right. I don't know if this was good or not. We can try to make use of this, honestly, to knock out some of these units. I've got to try to do that. The fact that logistics hasn't come up yet is kind of bad, because what we really needed to have was logistics come up, have a bunch of supply taken, because as it is right now, the Soviets are going to be able to react, and they're going to be able to react in a decent way, I suspect. That's my guess. But we're going to have to see. So I'm going to figure out the combats. I'm going to take care of that, and we will be back. Yeah. Okay, well, the combats are over. Not much happened. We had some retreats up here. We were able to knock back some Russians here, so we're trying to improve that situation that was developing, and it's not all the way cleared out yet, unfortunately. There's just not enough combat factors to launch a lot of successful attacks. Over here, we managed to push some stuff back. You can kind of see I got a little bit out here, so we're closing things off a little bit. We cleared some 1-4 rifle divisions, but yeah, it's still a tenuous situation here. Yeah, I'm just not sure how it's going to pan out yet. So we're going to go to the cup, and we will pull something out. And we get logistics. Okay. Well, what's interesting is, what this means for the game is that all the Axis chits came out, then logistics, then all the Soviet chits are going to come out. So in some ways, this is kind of a good thing for the Axis, because it means I'm pretty sure all of their units should come back into supply, and a lot of the Soviet units are going to be made isolated, or at the very least, more units will be put out of supply. So I'm going to take some time, I'm going to take care of the logistics, and then we're going to come back. Again, the Stavka chit won't be useful, so the Soviets are really just going to have a movement and a combat. But again, that combat is really going to be dependent on Zhukov, so we'll see how it goes. We'll be back. Okay, well, down here, some of the Soviet units are out of supply, because with the placement of the units, the rail line that is accessible to the Soviets for supply down here is basically this hex. So if you were within 5 hexes of this hex, you're in supply as the Soviets. So this guy and these guys way out here are now actually out of supply. They can try to pull back and get closer and sort of do a retreat backwards. But yeah. Now, of course, what I've also had to do is now I've got some Axis units that are out of supply here. They're out of supply only by a couple of hexes, so probably sometime next turn they'll get back into supply relatively easily. So that situation is just kind of what it is. Now up here is really where the rest of the story is, and right now, all the Axis units that are involved in this pocket are back in supply, and all of the units, even the ones that the tank units that had come up to open the supply lines, due to the shifting of the Axis maneuvering around and infiltrating, now they're isolated technically due to Zox. Now, that shouldn't be too difficult to restore because we're going to have some units react out of Tula and be able to reopen some of those supply lines, or do the same thing we did last turn. But it's probably going to get harder and harder for the Soviets to keep doing that because they're going to just be sending units down there to try to keep the line open, and eventually they're just going to get smushed. And with enough of these units being, picked apart, they're going to be able to do that. Now, this guy's probably going to get removed in the isolation phase no matter what, because he's just too surrounded by Zox. What I need to do as the Axis is get that guy done, and if I can't get these guys, then I at least need to move up to here and just knock out Voronezh, because it's been sitting there sort of out of supply, isolated for a really long time. The Soviets are starting to get reinforcements over here, and we just need to seal that up so that we've got space to maneuver. That's kind of where we're at this point. So there you go. We're going to go to the cup and pull the next chit. It is either going to be Soviet attack or Soviet move. Not sure which is better. Maybe a move first. But we'll see. And we get the Zhukov combat. Okay. So just as a reminder, if any Soviet units attack that are not in range of Zhukov, they're treated as out of supply. Obviously, any units that are out of supply now are going to attack unsupplied anyway. So I'm going to take a look, see what possibilities there are for the Soviets, and we'll come back after the combats, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so the Soviet combats were pretty straightforward. We were going to try to make some breakouts down here. Not that there was anywhere to go, but they failed, unfortunately. I rolled poorly. However, up here I rolled quite well and actually caused a step loss up here that was no big deal, but we did eliminate Axis stack. It was a reduced strength panzer division and an infantry unit. They got burnt out. It was an exchange result, but the Soviets managed to move forward now, and so you can see they're pushing Army Group Center back at this point, and it may only be a matter of time before that unit up there is toast, and there really isn't any way to get them out of there without attacking the Soviets back. So the Soviets are making some ground here in the center, but all of that is balanced against the fact that they've got this big wide problem over here, not terribly far away, and things are just kind of getting all kinds of crazy effed up. Okay, which leaves the Soviet move as the last action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform the move, and then we'll come back and we'll get through the last couple of phases of the turn, and we'll end the video. So I'm going to take care of movement. We will be back. Okay, well, Soviet movement's done. So I'm starting to move guys out of the city. Yeah. Let me just make sure I could make that move, because yes, I think I'm okay. All right. So I moved some units around down here to try to create something resembling a line, though it may not last very long. Up here, started moving the units out of the city just to start, again, creating a new line here, if that's what it's going to be. Because I'm going to put, the next turn's replacements and stuff in Stalingrad and in Tula, I suspect, and Krasnodar if I can manage it. It's really, right now, those are the three main cities, with Saratov being a secondary city. Now that we're starting to form a line here, we just need to keep pouring units out of those three cities. Tula to help this pocket, Stalingrad to continue to form a new line here, and then Krasnodar to just keep that pocket down there alive, so that we're holding on. Now, what I did with the move was the same thing I did last turn. I had units in Tula with high movement rate. I sent them down to help relieve the supply situation. And the same thing that happened before is going to happen here, where some of these units, a lot of these units, are going to be able to trace out through that cavalry unit and that tank unit to these rail lines. And it will restore, it will relieve a lot of these units of being isolated, which is good. And probably the one other move I should make is something like this, so that it is harder to get in here. And I've got to mark him with the isolated as well. So that could work a little bit, and keep the pocket alive, because we're tying up a lot of Axis units with this pocket either way. The only thing will be, we're going to start to be able to just swallow things up. It's really a question of, can the Axis outmaneuver and surround all these reinforcements I'm trying to put in to save it? Because here's the thing. The line here might have to start to thin, and if all of that's happening, the Soviets still have a great replacement rate right now, so they're just putting stuff back on the board, and the weather's turning. So what the Axis really needs to try to do here, next turn's going to be mud, so almost nothing's going to happen. They're going to have trouble, but if maybe in November, when the snow comes and makes the mud solidify a bit, they'll have one last chance to finish this pocket off. What I think what's really important is if they can just get rid of the pocket, get the rest of these guys up through here, creating the line that needs to be created, we will be in better shape than we have been for holding on. And again, we keep applying the pressure through this area here. We're opening the door to either Moscow or the east part of the map, where we can simply cut off supply lines and have a deep, I'm not sure what you would call it, a deep penetration of Russia, where we're disrupting the rail lines to Siberia. We do that, and the Soviets will be in trouble here. But we're totally avoiding really the case blue automatic victory scenarios. We're going down a different path. Anyway, so let's start through the next phase, right? So all the action chits are done. Axis Depot. So I think what we'll do is we'll roll for the most southern one, since we need to get him sort of headed this way, I guess, if we can. So we'll roll. I rolled a 4. And let's see, this is a mixed, so it gets to move 4 hexes. That's not as good as we would have liked, but we'll do what we can here. Do 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I'll send it this way, at least for the moment. And we'll make that work, and a lot of these guys will be back in supply because of that when we check supply next. Further up, our other supply is right here. Now, I don't think it makes sense to move this guy anywhere, so we'll leave him go. And basically the same with the rest of these supply depots. There's nowhere for them to really go, so I think that's all the movement we'll have for that. We don't have any Axis units that are isolated, so that's all we can really do. Yeah, because in 42, it's really only for, if I remember right, it's in the air section of rules. Yeah, only for this is only for isolated units, really. Yep. So nothing really to worry about there. So the attrition segment, right? We need to look at this. I think this is the only area that really matters. Everywhere else is, it's out of supply. It's out of supply. Nothing to worry about. So he can get 1, 2, 3, and he's fine. So he becomes out of supply. Out of supply. He's going to stay isolated. He's just out of supply. Out of supply. Out of supply. Out of supply. I mean, they're holding... they're just holding on. And honestly, that's all they really need to do. Is that they're holding on. Okay. Well, with that, we will have our one for sure isolated stack, which was an army and a tank corps in Livni are out. So they are removed. They go to our big old dead pile, which is quickly becoming disorganized, which I should do a better job about. So that's going to shorten the line a little bit for us here. We've got a little bit of maneuvering space. We can even, if we really wanted to, be thinking about, getting these guys moved up and just maybe moving up through here. I mean, we're going to be putting Tula under threat, which I see as a good thing. And we need to get pressure off this part of the line, which is tenuous at best. The only thing keeping them in check there is the fact that even with Zhukov, there's just not a whole lot of forces there. They're being used elsewhere, but I don't know. Things are getting mixed up down there. So, yeah, things are evolving here. We're still at 34 victory points at the end of turn 15. We're heading into the mud season next turn, and we will see what happens. Again, the Voronezh pocket is reducing, but it's reducing slowly, and the Soviets are keeping the dream alive here as reinforcements pour out of the east. So, I think that'll do it for this video. It's probably quite a long video at this point, even though I tried to shorten it. I tried, guys, I did. This is probably still a long one. We'll get this put up and uploaded to YouTube here as long as it takes. It will be several hours, I'm sure. But in any case, thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, hit like. If you'd like to see more, hit subscribe. We will continue, Case Blue, we will continue the East Front campaign in the next video, turn 16. Until then, keep gaming, take care, and we'll catch you later.